I would take advantage of my subscription with Restream to go live. So I'm going to be taking questions on Google Ads for the next 30 minutes. So if you have a question that you want to ask me, just come along and ask away. I just want to check to make sure that we are actually live. So I'm actually going to be going live. Here we are. Yeah, good. So it's in my Facebook group. And I'm also streaming also to, where else am I streaming to? I'm streaming to LinkedIn Live. I'm streaming to Periscope before it goes away, although I have heard rumors that Periscope might be around for a little while. So if you're listening to me on YouTube or Periscope or Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn, good to see you. And yes, I'm here to answer any questions you have for the next 30 minutes on Google Ads. And that can be pretty much anything to do with Google search itself, could be to do with remarketing, YouTube, display network, Google shopping. I was on a sort of a clubhouse last night with PPC Kirk, Neptune Moon, Julie, and Brett. And I just, for me, I really enjoy talking about the topic that I'm sort of most passionate about. And really, I've been doing Google Ads since the very beginning. Love answering questions about it. So if you have any questions about Google, then come along. If not, I'll be talking to myself for half an hour, and that won't even be the most littlest bit weird. So let me just see if I can pull it up on Twitter, see if we're live there. Not quite sure where do. Yeah, I'm trying to do this multi-destinational streaming, and it's not the easiest thing. So I kind of take my hat off to anyone that kind of does it regularly. But yeah, if you are seeing this, I would love to hear from you, just so I know that, like I said, it's out in the ether. But I know it's in my Facebook group because I'm in it. Let's have a look and see if I can find it on LinkedIn. Yeah, so it's live on LinkedIn as well. So if you don't have any questions about Google Ads, I will just talk just randomly about Google Ads. So don't really know what to say. It's weird. You see all these people going live and they've got like a whole raft of people answering questions. I guess maybe that's part of the preparation is the most important piece. So again, I just found myself with a little bit, a little bit of free time. So I've got a question that's asked now from Facebook. So thank you for that. What do I know about the algorithm update in May? So yes, I think the most important thing. So Ronan's just said, is the hat Mercedes a sponsor of mine? I wish Mercedes were a sponsor of mine, but unfortunately they are not a sponsor of mine. No, I'm just I'm a big sort of Lewis Hamilton fan. This is actually a Lewis Hamilton hat. My wife got it for me. She went to watch the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix a few years back, and she bought me this back from Abu Dhabi. So thanks for the question, Ronan. So to go back to the Facebook user want to know about the algorithm update in May. I mean, I think, Google is moving ever prolonged towards them being in more control of the automation. So I think, you're starting to see, we had a conversation last night about shopping, and will Google eventually retire standard shopping and just make sort of smart shopping the only game in town? I think it's kind of dangerous. I mean, I know we're talking about Google, but Microsoft shopping, they have enhanced CPC and nothing else. But it's really just a case of, I think, the performance on smart shopping is pretty good, and obviously what you don't get is you don't get a lot of data. I think. I haven't actually heard of a specific algorithm update in May. I have heard, obviously, that on the Facebook side of things, the app tracking transparency was probably due to go out the tail end of March. I think it's been pushed a little bit because of this CAID, which is the fingerprinting that's come out from China. So it may well be sometime in April that gets pushed. But I know that there's a consortium which Google is leading to do with Privacy Sandbox, which is moving more towards the sort of first party cookie, being retired. And, and I think, at that point in time, the whole game for advertisers is going to change, right? And I think that's part of the reason why a lot of the kind of changes that are being made around, specifically to do with analytics and stuff like that you're going to see some big changes there. I know that Facebook have announced that they're retiring Facebook analytics at the end of June. And again, I think I don't know what other people, I know we're going to talk about Google, but we'll just pivot off and talk about Facebook. But I think Facebook analytics is probably being retired, I guess, because partly because I think due to uptake. I don't think a lot of people even realized that Facebook analytics was available. And I think also because of app tracking transparency, I think it will mean that a lot of the data that is in Facebook analytics now will be redundant at the point in time that app tracking transparency rolls out. And I think the ability for you to be able to do some of the things you can do in Facebook analytics now will sort of cease to exist at that point. So I think so far I've had a update in May. Question about the hat. I actually have like a whole sort of a stack of hats. Normally I wouldn't wear a hat, but here in the UK, we're about 11 days away from barbershops opening up. They've been shut for quite some time, I think around about sort of December time. So I haven't had a haircut since then, other than my wife kind of clipping the back of my head with a set of clippers. I didn't really trust it with the front of my head. So I've kind of left that as it is. So for me, it's really just a case of, I have COVID hair at the moment, and I'm relatively ashamed of it, and I would rather keep it under a hat rather than sort of have it out there in the wide open. So Ronan's put a couple of weeks in France, a lot of YouTube ads dealing with a company named ClickCease. Yeah, so I think, so ClickCease are a kind of company that exists, and their whole reason for existing is to help advertisers that have what they class as click fraud, and what they'll do is they'll monitor it. I mean, I think that the challenge is that, quite often, there may well be sort of click fraud, but the challenge that you have is that, the tools that obviously exist, they cost money, right? And sometimes the challenge is, to kind of prove to Google that click fraud has taken place, could be less expensive than the actual tool that you're using to find the click fraud in the first instance, right? I mean, again, I think in some respects, I know a lot of people try and focus on the click fraud side of things. And personally, I think it's much better to focus on things like site speed and good ad copy and, making your landing pages more sort of, make them convert better. I think you're far more likely to kind of get better results by focusing on positive things rather than negatives. And I think, click fraud is, again, I'm not decrying it. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I think, the majority of the click fraud that takes place, right, Google will find it, and Google will, I say reward. That's completely the wrong word, but they will find it and eradicate it. Again, I think, somebody came out to say that, I think Microsoft advertising came up, they sort of blocked about 1.6 billion basically false clicks, right? And I know that for Google, the number will be significantly higher than that. And really, I think, I know that there are definitely other sort of tools other than ClickCease that kind of exist. And in some respects, it's a little bit, I find that sometimes it's a little bit sort of scare wary. They kind of, they exist to scare you into kind of thinking that the problem is bigger than it actually is, right? I mean, and like I said, I'm not saying that click fraud doesn't exist. It definitely exists now, and it existed probably more prevalently in the past. But again, I think, with the arrival of machine learning and artificial intelligence, they're able to kind of, to spot the fraud an awful lot quicker and better at Google now than they ever used to be before, right? And and again, I mean, I think famously many years ago, I actually said a little bit of click fraud is probably not a bad thing, right? And the reason I said that was because quite often it would help to improve your click through rate, which improves your quality score, which could then potentially reduce your overall CPCs. And again, I wouldn't necessarily say I'm condoning it, but it's just I think sometimes the people spend way too much time trying to troubleshoot sort of what might be potentially a small problem. And really, I mean, again, if you try and troubleshoot it manually, right, by analyzing log files, right, the amount of money that you potentially might get back will be disproportionate to the amount of time that you'll actually have to kind of invest to kind of troubleshoot it in the first place. And hopefully that sort of help with the kind of question for you. But thanks for the question. It's a really, really, really good question. But I think definitely, the steps that people take themselves could involve ClickSeis. I'm trying to think of some of the other tools that we've had a look at in the past. I mean, again, I think I actually defer most of the time now. I'll defer to kind of Google's ability to kind of eradicate click fraud as an issue, really. So Ronan, you're more than welcome. So I understand in France you guys are going back into lockdown. Is that right? I don't know if we should be kind of gloating because here in the UK we're coming out of it and most of the other countries in Europe are going into it. But yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's really, we need to get to the point where, the whole thing is eradicated rather than it being, different countries are in lockdown, different ones are not. So let me have a look and see what else we have kind of going on. See on Twitter if there was anything kicking around. Yeah, because I was watching funny enough, I was watching the news this morning, and they were interviewing some people who were sitting on the grass by the bank of the Seine, basically saying they're fed up with it. Which again, I'm pretty sure everyone in the world is fed up with the pandemic and life being restricted. But at the end of the day, it's kind of again, it should be really kind of like a global solution rather than each country trying to do their own thing. And I don't necessarily know that's the kind of the right way to handle it. Okay, so yeah, I was just checking to see that that I was live on YouTube. So yeah, so for me, as much as the exercise is to be answering questions here, I also wanted to make sure that it was actually streaming live to Facebook, to a group that I have over there called Elite Media Buyers, to LinkedIn, which obviously I know it's going there because Ronan asked a question, but also to YouTube because I have a channel over there which I'm trying to grow. And I think for me it's really, I spend a lot of money advertising on YouTube, but for me trying to kind of grow an organic user base on YouTube has been much more of a challenge. I think I understand completely the principles behind it, but to actually sort of take that into consistently sitting down, producing content, editing it and kind of uploading it and then sort of promoting it is not really something I've had a huge amount of time for. So yes, I'd love to kind of like understand whether that's something that sort of fits into your strategy. And if you do advertise on Google, sort of what do you find is your kind of biggest Achilles heel? What are the things that you struggle with the most with Google? I know a lot of people that I speak to, they always seem to have questions about in terms of order of pain, YouTube, then the Google Display Network and shopping. But yeah, I'd be really interested to see So Rona, this is turning into a one-to-one with you and I. It's good. I'm really kind of grateful for the fact that you're here and asking questions. So you have a strategy which consists in duplicating pages. Okay, so good. Somebody looks like somebody's answered that. Google Ads City database using Rail cannot be banned. Da, da, da. Yeah. So certainly one of the things that we do with whenever it comes to kind of like sort of SEO and PPC, we tend to find that the kind of what you'll find is that if you actually want to have a page that ranks well organically, like for SEO purposes, right? That's not necessarily going to be the best experience that a user will have for paid search, right? So what we've traditionally done is we've actually ended up creating sort of like a duplicate of the original sort of SEO page, and then stripping away all of the kind of the stuff that kind of is fluff, right? So, and I don't mean that in that it's not good content, but it's more of it's not relevant to what we're trying to do. So if we're trying to attract new customers, right, what we don't want to be doing is spending money buying traffic at, €5-6 or pounds per click, all right, and then sending them off to our Twitter feed because there's a social link on the page, right? So what we'll do is we'll actually strip away the kind of the non-essential components to actually get it so that the only thing that people can do is what we specifically want them to do. If that's like, fill in a form, click on download a book, buy something, that's really what we try and make sure that is left on the page. So what we will do is we will no index, no follow the dedicated pages that we've set up for PPC, so it won't interfere with with the the kind of the duplicate content issue, and what we also do just for kind of, for sort of extra clarity is there is actually a parameter that you can use. It's like in sort of brackets, it's ignore. So you put a kind of curly bracket, ignore, close the curly bracket. And what that will do is it will basically ignore all of the sort of additional parameters that you have in your URLs at that point. And what it will also do is it will instruct Google not to index those pages. So it's So if I kind of get your kind of question correct, I mean, definitely, the kind of the more relevant the quality score will be higher, the more relevant the dedicated page is to the content of the keyword, right? So there are definitely we've sort of done some things in the past where we've used, like in the olden days, PHP to actually have it so that within the URL there'd be things like the keyword, and then we could populate the title with the keyword, in the description the keyword. We could have alt tags for all of the images with the keyword, and then we could include an H1 in there as the keyword. And then what that will do is, based upon the ads that we had, we could then populate. Basically each page would be sort of unique based upon the keyword, right? Even though it was sort of driven by a template. So but I think somebody's put that there's a plugin to duplicate the pages easily on WordPress. And yeah, I mean, there's definitely some sort of smart people around to kind of do that sort of thing. So let me have a look. Okay. So I always like today's April 1st, which is, typically what you have is you have all these sort of April Fool's jokes, right? And I posted on Twitter that, in some respects, I just wish the day didn't ever exist, because again, I've watched sort of lots of different things on LinkedIn and Twitter and so on, and I've seen people saying they're leaving social media and so on. And again, sometimes it's obviously very, very true in some respects. People like Thierry Henry is kind of shutting down his social because because of challenges with that. And I think, for me, it's really just a case of, sometimes people need to be a little bit more sensitive to some of the experiences that people are having. So Ron, you got another question, any differences between the English market, Scottish and Welsh? So yeah, I mean, that there are, that, definitely, even within sort of like England, even though England is sort of one part of the United Kingdom, right? And Scotland's another part of the United Kingdom, Wales another part of the United Kingdom. They're all different, right? And even again, if you take sort of like in the UK, in England, you have the major cities. So I think in London, there's about 12 or 13 million people live in London. And again, even within London, you've got the centre of London, and then you've got all of the various sort of suburban parts of London, right? So for us, we whenever we're kind of setting up campaigns, we will always add in England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and we will also add in big cities. So what we're then able to do is if we feel that based upon the data that we're getting a better performance, or we feel that we need to be more aggressive with our strategy in, say, London, Manchester, Liverpool, Birmingham, the kind of the big cities in England, right? Then obviously we can adjust bids and modify based upon the geography. So that way we can kind of say, okay, well, our base bid is £1, but for London we might apply a plus 50%. And then obviously from there, that basically means that rather than having to kind of bid more for everywhere in the UK, we can only we bid only the kind of areas that we want. And again, sometimes you'll find that that works particularly well. Technical specificities in the HTML tags or campaign. Yeah, so I think certainly one of the things that we're seeing more kind of moves on Google's part towards is they're moving more towards the ability for you to be able to do. If you've ever run any kind of Google shopping campaigns, you'll know that one of the biggest challenges is getting your feed sufficiently good enough to enable you to kind of run ads for those products, right? And I think what Google would love to do in reality is to have sort of like a feedless solution. So Ronan, I'll come back to that. So for me, it's very much a case of like if you have a like a sort of a feedless solution for that, then you could end up with it working well, but it could also work quite badly if kind of Google don't get things right in terms of the categorization and everything else. So what we're seeing is that more and more sites should be leaning heavily on schema data, to actually sort of prioritize and categorize the products properly, give them the right sort of schema titles and descriptions and pricing and discount pricing and all the sort of dates, right? So it's very much kind of code that sits behind the scenes, but it helps the kind of the bots that kind of crawl the site to be able to understand kind of the information on the page and just dictate kind of what needs to be done when it comes to the actual feed itself. I think if I was going to kind of like look at a crystal ball and say, what should I be focusing on for the future? I would definitely be focusing more on sort of like that sort of rich media that sort of sits behind the scenes. It's not visible to the human eye, but it's definitely helpful to the bots that actually kind of do the work. So in terms of, to answer your question, Ronan, about the splitting countries, I wouldn't necessarily say I would split it one campaign per country. What I tend to do is I will add each of the sort of countries in as additional locations, right? And then adjust the kind of bids in the same way that I would do that with obviously the locations, but I would also do the same thing with gender. I would do the same thing with age, and I think I'd also do the same thing with income, right? So again, for me, it's very much a case of, if you've done your persona development properly, that, let's say for argument's sake, that 25 to 34-year-old females is your kind of best audience. You apply all of the kind of those modifiers. So you could say, okay, well, I have all the 18 to 24, 25 to 34, 35 to 44, 45 to 54, 55 to 64, and 65 plus. You also have the not known, right? Because in a lot of cases, Google doesn't know the age of the person that is there, and that's a decent percentage. So you definitely need to include not known as well. Same thing with male, female, and not known. And with income, you have, I think, the sort of top 10, 11 to I think it's 11 to 20, 21 to 30, and then kind of like you go down, and then the lower 50%, then not known. And then what you're able to do is you can actually sort of apply a modifier. So again, if your base bid is £1, right, and you say, okay, 25 to 34 female, I could kind of apply a plus 25% for the females, and I can apply a plus 25% for the 25 to 34. And what that will do is it will automatically modify the bid based upon the kind of the person and the information that Google holds. And so I think, so to answer your question, I don't think you need to be super aggressive. One domain for Wales, one for Scotland. Again, I think I think the reality is that a lot of people try and get too granular, which makes it a little bit more difficult for you to manage it, right? I think that there's definitely ways in which you can kind of make your adjustments without having to kind of split everything out. Same thing with like if you have, like, let's say you have 10,000 products in a shopping feed, right? What you should really be doing is you should be using custom labels to help you do the sort of segmentation, because again, I've seen a lot of people, they'll create campaigns in Google for search, and they'll call it top 10 keywords or something like that, and those keywords, in terms of what they are, could change over time, right? So it's much better to have the kind of campaign structure reflect your site itself. So again, if you have like if you're an e-commerce business and you're selling shoes, right, you might have sort of men's shoes, women's shoes. That can be sort of the way in which you split out your campaigns, right? And then what you could then do is you could kind of use labels to actually kind of adjust things, and then rather than having to kind of move things around, you can actually move keywords into and out of like a particular grouping based upon the labels that you use, right? So again, like we do a lot of labeling, we do a lot of segmentation that way, right? So then that way we can kind of say these are our top 15 keywords, but they don't need to be in a campaign that calls it the top 15 keywords. We can actually have it sort of in the normal sort of course of events, but we can sort of bring them to the top and manage them in a more aggressive way by identifying them through the use of labels. And or in the case of shopping, if it's a product, you can use custom labels. So hopefully that helps. So where are we? We are at 3 minutes. I'll probably take one more question from anyone if they're around. Obviously, LinkedIn's been good. I don't think. I think I'd need to do a bit more work in terms of notifying people that we're going live on Facebook and Periscope and YouTube, because obviously all the questions that I've had have come through from here. So let's have a look. So Ronan, thank you very much. Sorry you need to go. No, thank you for kind of stopping by. And my plan is I want to kind of do more of these moving forward, and appreciate the very kind feedback from you. Like I said, for me, this was very impromptu. I was originally supposed to have a meeting, and that meeting got cancelled. And I thought, what do I do now? Do I go and make a cup of tea or something like that? Bob, good to see you, my friend. How are you? Big fan of my work. That's very kind of you. How do you optimize for voice search? That's a really, really kind of good question. I think, obviously within Google, they've sort of, they've got rid of sort of broad match modified, to kind of get to the point where, really the kind of the game in town now is exact match and phrase match, right? I think, with kind of voice search, I think one of the challenges with with voice search is that, yes, we know that there are a lot of people that kind of use voice search now, right? But I think again, I think what I found is that more and more of the voice searches are, much kind of higher up in the funnel, right? So it tends to be, like they're very kind of, top of funnel, so very much at the awareness stage, right? And again, I think in the early days when sort of voice and local search kind of came out, there was a lot more prevalence of things like barbershop near me, restaurants and pizzas near me, that sort of thing. Whereas I think now what Google are able to do is they're able to kind of use the kind of the device that you're on, the time of the day of the week, as signals of what the actual intent of the person that's making the search is going to be, right? So again, if you do a voice search, right, and they can tell based upon your GPS signal that you're kind of out and about and walking, and that's why you're doing the voice search, because it's much easier to do voice search when you're walking down the street rather than trying to sort of type it into your phone and bump into people. I think, obviously Google will know, because they have Google Maps, that the intent is more is for voice is probably people are on a mobile device, so they'll be able to identify what the intent is. And I think really you'll probably find that there'll be the sort of signals that they get from that will dictate what the actual experience is that they end up showing you, right? And it could very well be that the same keyword, right, has maybe three or four different intentions based upon the context of where the person is and what they're doing and what device they're on, right? And and I think in terms of optimizing for it, I think for me, I think it is much more about trying to understand the what those contexts might be, right, and then lean on things like extensions and stuff like that. Yeah. So does it alter the potential of a campaign to target the right user at the right time effectively? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, it's kind of it's a difficult one. I think I think a lot of it would really be again, I think with Google's machine learning, I think they're doing a much better job, and and I think this is probably one of those cases where as much as I'm not a huge fan of smart campaigns, right? I think sometimes with voice search, leaning on Google's kind of understanding of the context is quite a useful way of doing that. So I think sometimes that's one of those scenarios where I might lean into sort of the smart campaign structure rather than rather than having it sort of a manual CPC or enhanced CPC, actually kind of going for something that's more sort of performance based, right? In which case the kind of context can be kind of dictated and governed by Google. So again, as we all know, Google are not showing a lot of the search data now that they used to, right? So in some respects, the days of us being able to kind of really get deep in the weeds with keywords has gone away, right? And I think I'm trying to focus a lot more now on the context of the user behavior, and again, that's kind of going to include things like the sort of time of the month that it happens to be. I mean, if you work with American clients, like most of the clients I have are based in North America, in the States, everyone gets paid every 2 weeks, right? So there's typically two sort of blips of, uptick in sales based upon the fact that people have been paid, right? So knowing when those sort of paydays are, I mean, a couple of weeks ago, we had almost like Black Friday, Cyber Monday, like upsurges in sales volumes. And it was because everyone in America virtually got a stimulus check of $1,400, right? So all of a sudden people had cash to spend, right? And they were like, okay, well, I'm going to go and spend it on the things that I wasn't able to buy before, but I've got some surplus cash now. So they went and bought it, right? So, and again, like understanding the context, we didn't do anything. Obviously, Google were the people that kind of saw that was happening by virtue of the fact that, we had a lot more traffic. We didn't actually predict and forecast that it was going to happen, but it's certainly something we put in a playbook for the future, that if we actually get to the point where there are further stimulus checks paid out, then we'll make sure that we're ready for that when it happens, and include it in the same way that we would forecast it for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and any other sort of big sort of seasonal event. So guys, I'm going to wrap up the call. I said I would do 30 minutes. I'm now at 35 minutes. But yeah, hopefully we can kind of do this again. Bob, great to see you again. Love to kind of catch up with you and have a proper pint somewhere when things actually get back to normal. And so hopefully you found this of benefit. And next time maybe there'll be more questions about Google, or we can do some other topics. So yeah, I mean, if you see this after the event, after I've shut it down, and there's specific things that you'd like to sort of see covered, like to discuss, then let me know in the comments, and I'd be happy to do that in the future. So I hope you're well, take care, and speak to you soon. Bye for now.